Channel 11 presents Talk It Over. Here's your host, Ellen Adelstein.
Hello. Today we have a very, very special guest, a well-known woman, one of the foremost voices in our community, and by our community I mean the United States, Madlyn Murray O'Hair. Madalyn is in Tucson to promote the activities of the American Atheist Foundation, but she's here to talk with us about some of her views and some of the lawsuits that she has filed over the years. Welcome, Madalyn.
I'm delighted to be here.
What makes Madlyn Murray O'Hair run? What makes you tick?
I take insulin 30 units every morning. I think that the most interesting thing is to be a part of the involved human community and to see how we can possibly solve some of the problems of mankind and to ameliorate in a little way the condition of mankind. I would hate to think that the world is no better off when I died than when I was born, and I want to contribute to some solutions.
What do you think will happen when you die?
Well, I don't know, and I don't really care. I hope that perhaps my son will take care of the, quote, remains, although I don't like that word, the body. When we die, that's it. I will rot just as any other organic material will rot, and that ends it all.
I'm sure many people have asked you, sincere religious people, perhaps of the more fundamentalist nature, doesn't that frighten you not to think that there's a beautiful hereafter to go to?
No, I think that it's primarily insane to attempt to use one's entire life to prepare for death and to seek adjustments and rewards at a time when one is no longer in possession of one's physical body, including one's mental facilities. The idea that we do terminate causes atheists to reach out in every way they conceivably can, to educate themselves as best as they can, to use their entire human potential, to self-actuate, to be involved, to use every hour of every day in living, and to do what the Declaration of the United States, the Declaration of Independence indicated, to have a life in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Those are very viable goals for anyone.
Speaking of goals of the United States of America, if you look at any of our pieces of money, the words "In God We Trust" are clearly stamped. How does that set with you?
It doesn't set with me at all, and of course this is one of the legal cases that we have been proceeding with, let me say it that way, for the last 2 years. A lower court in Austin, Texas, in respect to this stamp on our money. And incidentally, it has only been on the money in a compulsory manner since 1955 from the McCarthy hysteria. And the God that they're talking about is a Christian God, no other God. This is Jesus Christ.
Well, now wait a minute. How do you know that? I mean,
because I took time out to read the congressional record to see exactly what the intent of the congressmen and the senators were at that particular time. And over they repeated that this was a mark of Christianity, and the God in which the nation was trusting was Jesus Christ. It was not a Judaic Christian God, it was a Christian God. So I have challenged this, and as I say, a lower court has said that the phrase, "In God We Trust," has absolutely no religious meaning at all. It is simply a patriotic slogan. And I think that's frightening. The United States Supreme Court has denied certiorari, that is, review, and we are going now to the United Nations under the Human Rights Act, which the United States supports and about which Jimmy Carter talks so much, saying that as atheists we are affronted that each time we pass money we give a billboard for Jesus Christ.
But isn't that like ratting on your own country, going to the UN, where the United States has a heck of a lot of problems going already?
Well, actually, you see, if the United States government will not even bring itself in compliance with its own constitution and needs to be chastised from outside, this is pretty much like a Christian going to God and saying, "Please move in and take direction of my life." It's going to a superior power. or a group of persons who can put the necessary amount of persuasion on the United States. When we talk the way we do about human rights and then deny human rights to atheists, when we are coerced into a religious system, I think then that the United States needs such chastisement.
Well, but really, does this country deny rights to people who are atheists?
Human rights, it does indeed. For instance, in 5 states of the Union, an atheist cannot serve on the jury. In 5 states of the Union, an atheist cannot run for public office and take the seats. In 1 case of the Union, an atheist cannot even give testimony in a court of law. Across the nation, quite frequently, atheists cannot adopt children because almost every adoption agency and every state law requires that an adopted child be given a rearing in a home which has religious values. So yes, we are denied considerable numbers of human rights, human value systems in the United States at a time, of course, when we feel that we are the nation's finest citizens, the most educated, the most committed to democratic procedures, the most committed to fighting for the Bill of Rights of the Constitution.
Okay, we'll be back with Madlyn Murray O'Hair in just a moment. Madalyn, you alluded to the fact that perhaps the atheists are the most democratic people in the country right now. When one thinks of an atheist, you think of your name. But who are some of the other atheists that the world has known?
I think that we have more atheist heroes in the United States than perhaps any other country because, for instance, we had Clarence Darrow, the single greatest criminal attorney. We had Elizabeth Cady Stanton. We had Susan B. Anthony. We had Margaret Sanger, Florence Nightingale, Jane Addams, who started Hull House, Thomas Alva Edison, without whom we would have none of this technology.
Good heavens, no television.
Henry Ford was an atheist. Mark Twain was an atheist. Of course, Albert Einstein was an atheist. Incidentally, Albert Einstein was very good to the American atheist community because any time that an atheist ever wrote a book, all they had to do was send it to old Albert Einstein and he would write a foreword for it. So that
now, Albert Einstein was not Jewish then.
Well, he was an atheist, and he said so loud and clear, particularly in his older years. But in addition to that, as I say, Mark Twain was an atheist. Just about everybody who has added to the American scene. The Lick Observatory was founded by an atheist. The very first university in the United States in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was founded by an atheist. One of the very first that is state-owned and operated. And of course, Smithsonian Institute was founded by an atheist, so that we're much indebted in America to the atheists. I can say without fear of contradiction from anybody, as a matter of fact, that we have freedom of speech in the United States because of atheists. And we have freedom of press because of atheists, because we are the ones who fought the Comstock laws from the very beginning to the very end. Very bitter battles, and we are the ones who fought the heresy laws and the blasphemy laws for the right to freedom of speech. And without atheists, we would have none of these.
But Mrs. O'Hair, so many people who are on the opposite side of the fence say that you have taken away their freedom of speech because the majority of people in this country believe in some type of religion, and now that you have sued and removed prayer from school, you have taken away their freedom of speech.
But you see, there is no such thing in a democracy as majoritarian inducement of the minority. In a democracy, the minority's rights are those which are protected, and these are above majoritarian outreaches. Even if the majority would agree tomorrow to return the black man to slavery, he has a protection which cannot be taken away from him by the majority. And of course, the majority have no rights. For instance, free speech does not include yelling fire in a crowded theater, and freedom of religion does not mean that government buildings or government tax-supported institutions can be seized in order to have religious ceremonies of any kind in those buildings. Religion is a private affair, and the matters of all of our people are public affairs, and these two things in our nation do not cross.
Well, everyone knows that as far as theory goes, but when one is allowed to deduct charitable contributions to a church or a religious organization on one's income tax,
I'm going to try to stop then. I am very, very upset that one can give $1,000 to the Mormon church, deducted from their 1040, and this means that all of the persons who do not go to church then must support that Mormon church. To that extent, when one considers that the income from charitable gifts of individuals to the churches last year was $16 billion, and that government grants, largesse, and advantages through tax exemption was $50 billion to the churches last year, this means that the churches cost the taxpayers $64 billion just last year. I think that this is a high price to pay for heaven.
The largesse that you're speaking of, those aren't direct payments, are they?
A great number of them are direct payments.
Well,
for instance,
how can the government make payments to the church?
There have been at least 35 church-state separation cases, many of them very, very bitterly fought over the last years. Incidentally, a member of the Jewish community has been largely involved in that, Leo Pfeffer, a constitutional attorney who has taken part in a great number of those cases where money is given to religious schools for books, for teacher training, for administrative services, for upkeep. One of the things that the churches are doing now that's just absolutely unprincipled. The United States government is giving money to save, preserve American heritage points, and the churches are rushing in right now demanding money for the repair of churches, saying, well, this is a part of the national heritage. In Austin, Texas, for instance, I'm outraged that an existing Roman Catholic church with its own congregation has just asked for and received $500,000 to put on a new roof, pleading, of course, that this is an old church and a part of the American heritage.
But if you travel in Europe, the heritage of England, the heritage of France are these old, magnificent, depending on how you view architecture, old churches, Notre Dame and the ones in England. They are conceded as part of the heritage of those countries.
Well, they're not living churches anymore, almost 90% of those. I've been stunned recently in my travels abroad to find out that throughout Europe, only 3% to 7% of people attend churches, that those churches, by and large, are open as tourist attractions more than they are anything else. And to have 20 or 25 or 30 worshipers in there of a Sunday is an extraordinary thing. And these are priceless heritage points. However, a working church in America, attended by 1,000 parishioners, cannot possibly say that they need a new roof and they should get this from the United States government simply because they want to call themselves a part of mainstream American heritage or something which should be preserved. I think that this should go instead first to those secular things of our history which need preservation.
Okay. We're going to come back and we're going to ask Mrs. O'Hair her views on the Pope's recent visit to the United States. Mrs. O'Hair, if you had the opportunity to sit here and talk with the Pope, just like you're talking with me, what would you say to him?
I would tell him that I think that he's a medievalist and that he cannot grab the culture of today by the scruff of its neck and drag it back into the 14th century. And I would say to him that he has no right to tell women to become baby breeders again, or to tell us to return to the home and to refuse any kind of secular functions in the nation. I think that I would chastise him severely over his ideas in respect to birth control, marriage, sex education, the right to control our own body, and I think that I would tell him that he has no right to come to a nation such as ours and to deprecate our First Amendment rights by advocating that we should support Roman Catholic schools. I think that the man is reactionary, repressive, retrogradative. As a matter of fact, I have myself said many times that this particular Pope should be picked up and treated as a criminal for crimes against humanity, for what he has caused women alone to suffer and endure through his attitudes in respect to birth control and in respect to the continuing use of women by men as a sex object.
But isn't the Pope saying that he has the power, the ability to speak because he's the second in command to God, or he is there to see that God's way is followed, and therefore people should follow his way, his words?
But you see, he has a right to speak to the Roman Catholic community if the Roman Catholic community submits to his authority. But the female Roman Catholic community in the United States has not done that. 60% of Roman Catholic women are on the pill. How dare this man then come to America and say all women in America must bear children, because I want to recapture those 60% of Roman Catholic women, so I am telling all women to go back to the home. He is admitting his failure to control his own flock. If people care to get into a sadomasochistic operation, such as the Roman Catholic Church is, with its communicants and its directive Pope, that's their business. But in no respect can he reach out to the Protestant, the atheist, or the Jew and tell us what we may or may not do. We are beyond his province. He doesn't speak to me.
But wasn't he only speaking to the Roman Catholic people in this country?
No, he was not. There were plans from the Vatican before he got here, for instance, that although they own $160 billion worth of land, he did not want to meet the Roman Catholics on that land. He demanded they come into the street in order to show their political power. He demanded that he be given time and space on publicly owned land. He only went to Boston Commons because that's owned by the people of the United States. He only went to the Washington Mall because that's owned by the people, because he wanted to show a commingling of religion and government here in order to see that our government will give his schools parochial aid. I think that the display that he put on was shocking. It was politically astute, but I was also amazed that the politicians of America could not see where he was. He came in as a crowd plunger, that's all he is. He wanted to show off. He was a media spectacular, a Roman Catholic circus, and nothing else.
But millions and millions of people turned out to see him along his way.
I go to see Billy Graham. A lot of people are curious. I think a great number of people would go and see Superman. I'm not at all convinced that the people who came there were entirely worshipers of the Pope. I think that after the media event and the circus atmosphere wears out and the intellectuals of America get down to the point that they're going to read those addresses that he gave, instead of washing the outward shell which was presented, that they are going to find that these are harshly restrictive, harshly reactionary, and that this man is what some of the Jesuits are calling him, a medievalist. And I agree with that definition.
Well, surely you have heard the other side to the argument, though, about giving money to parochial schools, that if the people who sent their children to parochial schools suddenly removed them and sent them to the public schools,
we would be so much better off, because you see then all children would be treated alike and all children would be given a good secular education.
But we wouldn't have the buildings. We wouldn't have the teachers.
But we do have the buildings. That whole baby boom since after the Second World War is over. Right now we are finding that we have more than enough teachers. We have more than enough buildings, and some of the buildings are going vacant simply because we do not have enough children to teach them, to fill them in. I think that the American public, rather than have segregation continue in the Roman Catholic schools, which are more and more lily white, as are the Baptist schools, that rather than have that, the American public would be perfectly willing to pay whatever price is needed to be paid in order to have a quality education for all children across the board, rather than have the division of religion separate children down the line.
Well, for instance, I'm just giving you some of my background in reply to your segregated remark. In the city of St. Louis, which is a very Catholic community.
Very Catholic.
The parochial schools in St. Louis were the very first to bring good quality education to the black children. and the very first to desegregate themselves in that they admitted the black kids and gave them an education that was equal to the white kids.
I have to take these statistics that are given by the Health, Education, and Welfare Department of the United States. Quality education by the Roman Catholic Church, incidentally, is a joke. One of the things that they're trying to do right now is to upgrade their teachers, because quite frequently they had devoted nuns rather than good teachers. They did not have the educational background in order to be standardized or accepted as quality schools from an ordinary standpoint of government accreditation. So that there has been a long-term struggle with the Roman Catholic schools in this respect. Right now, there is a struggle in the Roman Catholic school over whether or not the teachers are going to be able to get a minimum salary, because they are still relying upon religious enthusiasts rather than quality education. I know that in isolated places such as St. Louis, in some schools, or even in Boston in some schools, that the Roman Catholic Church has moved out. And I just wonder whether this is because, since I'm a cynic, there is some sort of subsidy for taking those black children in. I don't think that the Roman Catholic Church would move out any place if money wasn't involved.
Well, we need to take a commercial, but I will say in defense of the church that this was back in the 50s when there was no subsidy involved. But before you respond to that, we have to take a commercial.
Also when there weren't so many black children needing that kind of care.
While we're finishing our program, we're going to throw up the address in case any of you would like to get in touch with Mrs. Murray. And while we're talking, that'll be visible on your screen. Talking about St. Louis is famous for its blue laws.
Oh, yes, indeed it is. And this is, of course, is reaching out across the United States. And simply because this is based on religious precepts, I am utterly opposed to it.
Have you ever sued over it?
We would like to sue, but once again, the same thing happens, that all cause organizations are small, always seeking money, always seeking to broaden their base in order to do what is necessary to be done. We simply need a couple of rich angels in order to finance those suits.
How do you support yourself, Mrs. Murray?
My son supports me. I haven't had any salary, or I haven't had any ownership of anything since the Bible prayer case began, because I am plagued by too many suits against me that are harassment suits. So I divested myself of all of my income and all of property a long time ago.
And what does your son do for a living?
My son is the executive director of the American Atheist Center, and he receives a salary for that and supports me. Incidentally, the American Atheist Center and its outreaches into the community are very broad. People can get in touch here in Tucson.
Okay, quickly, because we're out of time, could you just tell us briefly about the suit you have filed in Tucson, Arizona?
Well, actually, it's the Tucson chapter of American Atheists, and they have filed a suit in order to stop prayers in your city council. Surely the people in your city council do not need an aid of a special intervention from heaven in order to run this small town and to do a good job. And we would like to see them depend upon themselves and exclude religious exercises from government.
Okay, thank you so much. We have been talking with Madlyn Murray O'Hair, the foremost authority on atheism in this country.
You've been watching Talk It Over with your host, Ellen Adelstein. Join us every week at this same time for Talk It Over here on Channel 11. The preceding program was pre-recorded.